We are starting with MP Morantz for the first 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to direct my questions to Dr. Mintz. Dr. Mintz, pleasure to have you back at committee. It should be no surprise that I want to ask you about the capital gains tax. You paint a pretty stark picture of the effect of this tax. We had the finance minister come out on the day she introduced it with the budget in the spring, basically, well, we're just asking the wealthiest to pay just a little bit more, and it's only 0.13% of Canadians. Now, you, in your earlier testimony, said that you calculate that it's far more than that it worked out to be about 5% of taxpayers over their lifetime, around just over 1.2 million people. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And does that include small business corporations that don't get the benefit of the $250,000 threshold allowance at 50% inclusion?
It's just based on the data that one gets working with Statistics Canada, what's called SPDM data, and there's longitudinal data available, which there's no where the capital gains comes from. There's no particular source.
Okay, and there's some other things you talk about in. Well, I read your deep dive in September about the carbon tax. The capital gains tax. Carbon tax is a whole other matter. You make some other claims, even though the government said, well, this isn't going to have any significant effect on our economy. You opined that that employment will decline by 414,000 people. Could you comment on that?
Yes. Well, I think there's a bit of a history behind analysis of taxation on on capital investment, which I've been part of in terms of the work that was done over the years, going back to the work that I did with Robin Bodway and Neil Bruce in 1984. So, and I came up to finance in 1984 to help them develop their analysis of corporate taxation and what's called the marginal effective tax rate modeling. The reason I'm mentioning that is that initially when people did modeling, they included capital gains in the the so-called user cost of capital, although they normally did not think about corporate capital gains taxes at that time, and neither did we when we started working at finance. In fact, most people were kind of just left out capital gains. Recently, actually, I've taken a lot of interest in this. In fact, I have someone working with me. But basically, to basically say this is that it's just incorrect to assume that there's no impact of increase in capital gains tax rate on investment, and it's for the two reasons that I gave. One, there's a home bias by individuals to own shares, and also the fact that when you increase the corporate capital gains tax rate, that will impact investment.
So, but just for the people watching, to boil it down to the effect as opposed to all the stuff that goes on kind of under the point of the pyramid, all the great work that you do, at the end of the day, people are interested in what the effect is going to be on their lives. And you estimate that about just over 400,000 jobs will be sacrificed over this increase in the capital gains tax. Correct?
Correct.
And you also say that this is going to blow like a $90 billion hole in our country's GDP, which you estimate to be about 3% of GDP. And what I wanted to ask you about, there's been a lot of writing by economists lately about, our per capita GDP falling behind the U.S., that it's slow now or slower than it was during the Great Depression. If you were giving advice to the government under these circumstances, and they came to you and said, do you think that if we increasing the capital gains inclusion rate would be a good thing to do while our GDP per capita is lower now than it was in the Great Depression, what would you tell them?
I would tell them, first of all, the timing is bad. Not when you have almost 2 years or 3 years. Now we're going to get into, my view, of negative real per capita GDP growth. I think that's a very serious issue. And so the timing is poor in terms of doing it. I think, I think there were changes that are going to be required, but I would have done that through a more general tax reform, because I think there's a number of issues, complex issues that are involved with capital gains taxation, such as inflation, the locked-in effect. You can go on with a number of things, but also the balance between dividend taxation and capital gains taxation. So that's why it needs a general approach and not one that's very
Very
specific.
much. Just quickly before I move on, I just want to confirm, like, kind of brief yes or no. Your testimony was 50% of those impacted by the capital gains actually make less than $117,000 otherwise would make less than $117,000 a year. That $90 billion we see a loss of $90 billion of GDP and an increase of unemployment of about 400,000. Do I have that correct? Okay.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Oh, yes, and I should add, there's a paper that City Hall is going to be putting out of mine that gives a lot of the references and detail, and it'll be available in answer to Mr. Sunbury.